Well, we're thrilled today to be joined by the play-by-play voice of the Detroit Tigers, Dan Dickerson. Good morning.
Morning, Andy. How are you?
Oh, we're doing great. Looking forward to the ball game tonight from Kansas City after what's been kind of a rough road trip so far. You're out on the road, obviously traveling with the team. I was wondering, what's a day like for you out on the road? What do you do with the time, kind of between the games?
There's never a lot of downtime, and it's a lot of quote-unquote work, but it's fun. To get ready, to give you an idea, to get ready for a typical series like the Angels series, a team we have not seen, on the flight out to California, you're basically, I've put on my laptop I use Baseball Reference a lot, and I will build a bio on every player. So I build basically a page on every player, and then when the game starts, I put the lineup in order in a folder, and so I can flip the pages, and the bios that I built are there. But that just takes time to cut and paste a little bit, pick out any stats that I think might be worthwhile. How's the guy been lately? So I build bios on every player, and then I usually go back a week or so and build a file of clips on what the team's been doing. Maybe a good feature that you found. I like to clip stuff during the season. It all ends up in a big stack by the end of the season. So then in the off season, I actually put it into a file where I might find it. And then those are the things I take with me on the road. And again, you're looking for just kind of any feature, anything that might give you insight into a guy or a manager. And then you just kind of think about, you don't forget about the Tigers. What's going on with the Tigers? What things can I talk to players about when I get to the ballpark? So usually, just to get ready for a series usually takes, 6, 7, 8 hours, but it's fun. And then the days in between, I like to read, so I'm either reading about baseball or, reading something else in the morning hours, get a workout in, and the days go quick. But generally, you try to get, when you're on the road, caught up, so that when you're home, you can spend time with the kids and spend as much time as possible if we go to the ballpark with the kids.
Dan Dickerson, the flagship station for the Detroit Tigers, and of course we hear his voice all the time right here on WCSR with the Tigers Radio Network. You have a couple of kids back in Michigan. You're from Michigan yourself. Does the family ever get to go on one of these trips with you? Can you take them on the road, or is that tough?
They can go anytime. It's just a matter of timing it with their activities. My daughter plays volleyball, and her season just ended down in Florida with a national tournament. My son plays a little baseball, a little lacrosse, so it's a little bit tricky until their seasons end, and baseball is going to end for my son a little bit, I think in a couple of weeks. But they always try to go, if we can go to Cleveland before school gets out on a weekend, they'll come to Cleveland. Chicago's always a must, but we're not even sure if they're going to make one Chicago trip this year, but Chicago is usually the big trip. And then we haven't been able to, but I think if we can figure out, around their schedules, I'd love them to come. Kansas City actually is a really nice stop. The ballpark's beautiful. Where we stay in Kansas City is very nice. They've got a nice pool. You think about the things for them. So this would be a nice stop. There are a couple of other places that it'd be fun to take them, but it's juggling. My wife works and she teaches at Michigan State, so we have to build it around her schedule as well, so that gets a little bit tricky. But Chicago in the summer, that's a pretty good road trip.
You worked with Ernie Harwell for 3 years, broadcasting 3 of the innings with Ernie. I just took Owen, my 8-year-old, to see the play that Mitch Albom did, and I've heard you promote a couple of times. Just talk a little bit about that incredible experience to work with the Hall of Famer Ernie Harwell and the play Ernie by Mitch Albom.
I haven't been able to see the play. It just hasn't worked out yet with our schedules with baseball games, because the matinee doesn't quite fit into even on a night game, doesn't quite fit in because you have to be downstairs for Jim Leland by 3:30. But, what an incredible person. I always say to people, as nice as you think he was, just by listening to him, or maybe you met him, he was even nicer in person. He really was. He was that kind of person who responded to every request. The number of people that he met on the road who just called the hotel and said, hey, can we go to lunch? And he'd go to lunch and form a lifetime friendship with him in cities all around the country. We met a lot of these people, and then we kind of inherited them after he retired, which is kind of neat. But he was so, for me, I called him in the 90s when I moved to Detroit and had made a practice tape at Tiger Stadium. I didn't know him well. I'd met him a couple of times, but I guess felt comfortable enough to call him and asked if he would listen to my tape. He said, "Sure, why don't you come over to my house?"
Wow.
I was floored by that, and so I did. I went over to his house, and we sat at the kitchen table, and he listened to my tape, and he didn't just say, "Oh, that's nice, you'll do fine." I mean, he really listened with a practiced ear, and the pitch isn't down low, it's low. It's one word, but it's better.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little tighter, and you don't have to, no wasted words. Work off your scorecard. Let people know how we got to this point in the game. Use red and blue ink so that everything in red is somebody who got on base, so you can see where the hits are bunched together. And I do that to this day. So for him to do that, and then he kind of kept an eye on me during the 90s. I did a Michigan game that I think, to this day, the ability to do some Michigan football, I think, was probably the biggest break I got because it established me in a major market doing a major sport versus high school sports in Grand Rapids, which, I loved, but it just didn't carry the same weight. And he heard that broadcast, and he wrote me a nice little note after that. And so we kept in touch, and then, he gave me an inning of play-by-play in the final game at Tiger Stadium.
Wow.
On a day when he was down to his last 3 innings, and obviously a very emotional day, and he gave me an inning of play-by-play. And that helped get me into the booth in 2000. And then to just watch him for 3 years. I'm a stats guy. I love stats. That's what got me into baseball, Stratomatic baseball in 1969. But he always reminded me, it's a game of people. And he never said it, but don't forget, there are people behind the numbers. And that serves kind of a daily reminder for me to this very day. I always feel like I carry a little bit of Ernie with me into the booth, just in that I grew up listening to him. And I always liked the fact that he gave the opposing team a good call. It wasn't but, you give the home team a little better call, but you give the other team a good call as well.
Sure.
I just like the way he called the game. And we're different, but I think I've taken a lot from him and watching him and listening to him that I hope I carry on for a long time.
I tell you that I hope you get a chance to see the play. I know you will. It was magical. I mean, the actor that they got to play Ernie was right on point, and it's so cool. Right there in the Hockey Town Cafe building, there's a little intimate theater. It seats a couple hundred people, and really worth the time for everybody listening to go check that out. You mentioned you're a stats guy. I understand you're one of the original fantasy baseball players from a Rotisserie League. How did that work out?
That's one of those great things when you work in radio. You get invitations to do things, and this was just completely fluky. It was, I want to say, 83. Might have been 82 when I got the invite. But there had been an article in Sports Illustrated about this thing called Rotisserie League baseball. So a guy who's now a dear friend, Dave Kagan, clipped the article, sent it into the station to my sports director, Dennis Sutton. I wasn't even in sports at the time at WCUZ Radio, and Dennis wasn't interested. He put it in my file cabinet and said, "Dan, thought you might be interested." So I called Dave and I said, "Yeah, I'm interested. What is this?" And the next year we had a draft of Rotisserie League baseball. We used to keep stats on our own on a piece of paper, and we'd total them up and send them into the commissioner every week. I mean, you talk about the early days of Rotisserie League baseball. And we started, I think, in 83 was, I think, our first year. So we're coming up on 30 years. And there are 3 originals still in the league. And, guys have come and gone. There are a lot of guys who have still been with us now for 10, 15 years. But it's been a lot of fun. I can't draft anymore because I hold the draft while I'm in spring training, although they did come down to Florida this year. They've decided that that's actually a pretty good way to have the draft down in Florida. So I've been able to draft at least partially a couple of times. So it's a lot of fun. I mean, I've always enjoyed it. It's a good group of guys. I've met some really great people through it. And, my buddy Dave is, what a fluke that was passed on to our sports director, and he passed it on to me, and it turned into a pretty good thing.
Probably one of the biggest stories that we turn to this Tigers team, speaking with Dan Dickerson, the play-by-play voice of the Detroit Tigers. The biggest story over the past weeks, probably the firing of Rick Knapp, the pitching coach. Were you as surprised as I was by that move, and what was your reaction?
Surprised in Jim Leyland hasn't let anybody go during the season before. And it was a mutual decision with Dave Dombrowski and Jim Leyland. So I was surprised in that regard. I think you aren't surprised in that I think anytime a group that has some high expectations, or I think the expectations for this rotation were, this should be an upper half. This should be a top half of the league rotation and staff. And when it doesn't perform, somebody usually is going to, pay the price. And unfortunately, it was Rick. I like Rick a lot. I think he's a terrific guy. And I think, there's something to, maybe sometimes you just need a different voice. But for whatever reason, it wasn't working in terms of the results they expected with this staff. And yes, some of the blame goes to the players. But I just think, I think it's hard sometimes. I think it's hard for anyone to figure out, when's the right time to fire someone or to stick with someone. But I think when you just have to kind of observe and see, okay, is the message getting through? And if not, why not? And if, maybe it's nobody's fault, but you just need a different voice to maybe even sometimes say the same thing. But it's a different voice. And you'll hear that all the time from players, whether it's hitters, whether it's pitchers. It's something I've probably heard before, but the way this guy said it stuck with me.
Right.
And I think you heard in the comments about Rick Knapp. He was well-liked, but they just felt that they need more out of this staff and that they needed a different voice.
Quickly on the rotation, as you look at it now, Charlie Furbush being inserted into that mix, Phil Koch being sent back to the bullpen. Do you see Charlie Furbush as a long-term possibility in that rotation?
I do. I'd be real curious to see what he does. I mean, I think compare, say, for instance, to Jacob Turner, who only threw 125 innings last year, and a lot of people are excited about the possibility that he might come up. But, I mean, you see a guy, start with the innings. He did not pitch many innings last year, so his innings are not going to go up by very much this year. Furbush pitched, a few more innings, so he can probably go deeper into the season, which is a good thing. Being in the bullpen saved his arm a little bit in terms of total innings. But I just like the stuff. I like the guts that he had. His major league debut, he walked the first man he faced. He got squeezed on the call. Bases were loaded. One batter into his major league career, and he struck out the next two guys. That showed me something. And he's got the pitches. I think he's got that mound presence and a little bit of moxie. And I think this guy's going to be good. His rookie pitcher is going to get roughed up now and then. I don't think there's any question. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does. I do think there is deception in his delivery. I do think his fastball, which is a low 90s fastball, which is plenty good, it gets up on guys quickly sometimes. I think he has to set it up right, but I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does. I think there will be ups and downs, but I tell you, the 4 2/3 the other day in Anaheim was pretty good.
Detroit dominated in interleague play the past couple of years, or at least they had a winning record. This year, not so much. It was kind of a struggle for them. Do you see that as just kind of the law of averages catching up to this baseball team, or is there some reason for concern with that?
Well, some of those years they were dominating. The American League won like 150 games, and the National League won 100. It was a huge gap, and the gap was down to 10 games this year. I think the National League has gotten much more competitive in the last 2 years. I don't think there's any question. And sometimes, the schedule on paper looks like it's pretty favorable when you play Pittsburgh and Arizona, and then all of a sudden you're playing a Pittsburgh team that's in the hunt and above 500, and an Arizona team that's in the hunt and in first place. Those were two last-place teams last year, and they played some pretty good teams. I think it was disappointing. The Colorado-L.A. trip I thought was disappointing because I think L.A. is down, and I think that was a team that you really have to win that series. I think the Tigers felt that way. Colorado's not the same team. So those two kind of stood out. The other series, that they were playing better teams. Would you have liked to have seen a better record? Of course. But I think the National League is better. And Pittsburgh, to me, was an interesting team. I'm really curious to see what they're going to do the rest of the way. You pull for a team like that.
Right.
That's for sure.
We talk a lot here on our station and on our sports show about Ryan Raburn. I think he's a likable guy. We all kind of pull for him, but yet here he is, batting still around 200, struggling in the field, although he saved the game with an incredible catch the other day. Have you been surprised with the patience that the Tigers organization has shown in him?
Well, surprised in, I think what you have to think about what your options are. And you think about what the upside is, and I know it's been 200 at-bats, but where are you going to go get a guy who has done what he's done in the last 2 years, over the last 4 months, which is hit 280 with power? And we're not talking, I mean, we're talking a slugging percentage over 500. Those guys aren't easy to find, and it would be stunning if he never got it together this year. And so I think that's the tough part with someone like Ryan Raburn. Do you just want to give up on him?
Right. And
then he goes and does it for somebody else? Or do you think in baseball, 90% of the time, what you've seen, and I know it's 4 months, but it was still the last 2 years, you know what he can do, you know what's in there, how long do you go to try to get it out? I think that's a tough, but you always have to think about, okay, it's easy to say sit him. Ramon Santiago, I love Ramon Santiago. He's hitting .215 with no power. So, yes, he's better defensively. So then, again, those are the determinations you're making. The Tigers have already determined he's not going to be an everyday second baseman, talking about Santiago. So it's tough. I mean, they're just figuring out ways to get his bat going. And at some point, he either turns into a platoon player. I don't think they're going to let him go. But at some point, the playing time's going to drop. But that's why they keep putting him out there, because the track record is there. It's just a matter of what point do you say, okay, it's not going to happen this year.
I'd kind of given up on Carlos Guillen with the injuries in the spring and whatnot, but I hear he's now at AAA Toledo playing. Do you see any way that Guillen could make an impact on this team the rest of the way?
He could. I just think I'll believe it when I see it because of the health.
Right.
He could. I don't think you bank on him, but I think sometime after the All-Star break, he'll make a shot at playing, and I just think it will really hold up health-wise. I mean, he's already had I don't know if a setback, but he sat out a day at Toledo because of concern with the knee. So we'll see. I mean, if he does come back and he's healthy, yeah, he could absolutely help this team out.
Dan Dickerson with us on WCSR. Just a couple more questions. We'll let you go, Dan. I know you're super busy. Detroit has 4 All-Stars. Victor Martinez in the mix, potentially as the 34th man. And, of course, we're encouraging everybody to continue to vote for Victor, vote V-Mart, and all the rest of it. The Tigers a game and a half behind Cleveland. In your mind, is Justin Verlander the MVP of this team through the first half, or could you make a case for somebody else?
Hands down. I mean, Cabrera's right there. But just because the other parts of the rotation have had great inconsistencies, yes, I would say he's been, nothing short of phenomenal for 12 starts now. So they needed it. They needed the guy that he's going to go out there, and it's something when you can see 6 straight games of 1 run or none, and he's going 7 or more. That's pretty phenomenal. So, yes, I think, but Cabrera, when you see home runs like you saw yesterday, you also realize that I would pick those co-MVPs because his bat, I think, has had a ripple effect on everybody else in the lineup. It's no accident that Peralta's having a great year with Martinez now in the lineup. Cabrera's not getting walked as much. So there's been that ripple effect, I think, from Cabrera on down.
We keep waiting for Cleveland to kind of come back to earth here a little bit, and here they are again beating the Yankees last night, still a game and a half ahead of Detroit. I remember last year about this time after the All-Star break, Tigers had a series down in Cleveland and got swept and never really recovered from that. Is this a key point in your mind in the season for the Tigers?
Well, I think the whole second half, I don't remember quite a stretch like this. This is 74 games to go starting today, and 50 of the 74 will be in the Central. I don't remember that many. Last year I looked, it was half, 37 out of 74 in the Central. So now's the time, but I think it's going to be constant tests, from here on out. They had the best record in the Central through 22 games at 15-7, and I think that's the best sign of all. That was 5-0 against the Twins, though, and I think the Twins are going to be they're going to be a factor. Whether they're in the race or not, I don't know. But they're going to be a factor in the second half because they're getting healthier. But this just begins a big stretch. I kind of like it in a way because you're going to decide it by playing the teams in your own division. And I think the Tigers, they do have the best team in the division. I still think Chicago is due to get hot, but they have not. Tigers really haven't been hot for a month and a half. They've been playing 500. And I think the Indians are making it clear they're going to be a factor. And I think they do have enough I think Fausto Carmona is a key, and he's not having a good year. He's been very inconsistent, but he needs to kind of lead that staff. And if he doesn't, I think there's a potential for guys who haven't been in a race and in a rotation for a full season to maybe wear it down a little bit toward the end of the year.
Do you think we'll see a big shakeup in this organization if they don't get in, if they don't finish this and make it the playoffs?
Everybody expects this is a year where they have to win, and I mean, you never know what's going to happen. But I think there's something to be said for stability. But I mean, everybody realizes that you have to win. I mean, there's no question about that. No one's going to be surprised. But I'm not going to make any predictions one way or the other. But there is an urgency to win, and I think they're going to figure out if whatever they have to add. Dave Dombrowski will figure that out and add that piece. But I think they feel that this is a year that it's important to win the division, and there's a very good shot, I think, with the Twins having all the problems they've had and the Sox not, being hot right now and 10 games over. This is a division that is there for the taking.
Dan Dickerson and Jim Price on our air tonight with the ball game in Kansas City. Dan, taking some time out on the road for us, I really can't thank you enough. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Good talking with you.